If you've ever wondered if Jesus is created or if Jesus is God himself, Jesus is the burning bush, or Jesus is Jehovah, you don't need to look any further than Galatians chapter 3, and that's what we're going to study today. Starting at verse 15, this is the contrast that Paul's laying out between the law and the promise. And if we understand this, there's no question that Jesus is Jehovah. Starting at verse 15, this is in the Net Bible. Brothers and sisters, I offer an example from everyday life. When a covenant has been ratified, even though it is only a human contract, no one can set aside or add anything to it. So this is talking about the law that even Moses says that in Deuteronomy 4:2 that you can't add or take away from the law. The law's there, and therefore you cannot add or take away from it. Verse 16, it says, now the promise were spoken to Abraham and his descendant, singular. Scriptures do not say, and to his descendants, plural, referring to many, but and to your descendant, referring to one, who is Christ. So this promise comes through Christ alone. And the law was given through angels and Moses, and this is the foundation, the context that is being spoken of here. And it says that the promise was given way before the law. In verse 17, it says, what I am saying is this, that the law came 430 years later, does not cancel the covenant previously ratified by God, as to invalidate the promise. So Paul is saying that the promise was given at least 430 years prior to the law, but the law itself does not nullify the promise that God's already made Abraham. So this is the context of this particular scripture. For if we inherit it based on the law, it is no longer based on the promise. So this is a promise, contrast again to the law. But God gracefully gave it to Abraham through his promise. So who gave it? God gave it, and through Christ, right? So this is the context. When then was the law given? It was added because of transgression. So this is Paul saying that the law was continuously added to because humans at that time kept sinning, and then God says, hey, you can't do this. Now we're going to add this new law. And that's what Paul's saying. Until the arrival of the descendant, singular. So the law was given all the way up until Jesus is what Paul is hinting to whom the promise has been made. It was administrated through angels and in intermediaries. So we know that the law was given through angels and through Moses and through other humans in there. So this is the context. Here is the mic drop of the whole context. Verse 20, it says, now an intermediary, Moses and angels and so forth, is not for one party alone. So the intermediary is not for the humans and not for God, but is the mediary between God and humans, which is Moses, and they interact with Moses, and Moses went to do intercession for the Israelites and so forth and so forth. And so this is the context. But God is one. So this is the context. God says he is going to uphold this covenant that he gave to Abraham. And unlike the law, this promise does not have intermediaries. And in verse 16, we read that this descendant is the one is going to have the promise fulfilled, which is Christ, the one who is Christ. So if Christ is not God and he's an intermediary on behalf of God, this whole verse, this whole chapter right here is not true, because the law has intermediaries, but God's promise is one. Jesus is indisputable, Jehovah himself.